This slide presentation is also a rather short presentation, but I want to keep moving on with painting the portrait of our patient with this slideshow and the next slideshow, reflecting the psychological issues related to hearing loss. So this one is speech perception in hearing loss, and also related to amplification and how essential it is to prepare our patient for realistic expectations, and to hopefully continue to prove the point that fitting hearing aids alone for hearing impaired individuals shouldn't be the end of the road, that often other things are needed and hopefully are recommended. So first, to review regarding hearing aids, the main aim of amplification is to maximize speech, right? To maximize speech understanding for the hearing impaired, to make speech audible. And unfortunately, when we see the statement, maximize speech understanding, unfortunately, oftentimes because of the degree of hearing loss and the degree of damage to both outer hair cells in the cochlea and inner hair cells, we may, as audiologists, be able to make sound audible, yet we lose some of the clarity, even if we dispense the most expensive, or what we think of as the top of the line hearing aids on the market. Oftentimes, because of the amount of damage in the cochlea, and I mean also that can be in moderate hearing losses, moderate to severe, not just a profound loss, it can be very difficult to maximize speech understanding. We can do a better job of it in quiet, right? Our hearing impaired individuals are going to be more successful with hearing aids in quiet. It's going to amplify that sound, but we tend to not have as much success in background noise. And here lies the dilemma. Most of our hearing impaired people will say the most difficulty I have is in situations with background noise. They'll say, I do okay one-on-one, I do okay if I'm close to the speaker, but add background noise and I'm lost. Yet, this continues to be one of the main challenges with amplification. Although, and when we look at the next point, recent improvements have focused a great deal on hearing in noise and providing more benefit in the past. So with the advent of digital technology and the vast improvements in digital technology, with digital signal processing, noise reduction, microphone technology, hearing aids are much better at increasing the desired sound, or most likely speech, and decreasing noise, but can never do that completely. So when we see, unfortunately, our patients will see ads for hearing aids saying, our hearing aid can reduce all background noise. But if we think that through, that's not possible. The hearing aid can't say, okay, I want to hear exactly what the person in front of me is saying and not hear anything else in the room. That's not possible. But our digital technology and our microphone technology is saying the individual wearing the hearing aids is looking straight ahead. I'm going to amplify that sound and try to reduce the other noise in the room, as we've been talking about improving the signal to noise ratio. So you've learned so far in this course that hearing aids alone are not always enough, and that's why we can suggest assistive listening devices with microphones, FM systems that could be helpful, Bluetooth technology to utilize an FM system to enhance the signal to noise ratio, and oral rehabilitation, which is going to be additional things we talk about, speech reading, communication strategies. So, the next couple slides are probably a review for you from Basic Aud and the speech courses you've had up to this point. So when we talk about the makeup, the acoustic characteristics of speech, we know that conversational speech sounds vary in intensity from approximately 65 dBSPL to 70 dBSPL, and that's sound pressure level. That's different than dBHL. Sound pressure level is the intensity of that sound, the decibel level at a point in space, in a point in area in space. So conversational speech varies from 65 to 70 for low frequency vowels and diphthongs. Consonants can be up to 30 dB lower in intensity. And oftentimes the background noise is as louder or louder than speech sounds, right? Making, when you have a hearing loss, it very difficult, depending on the configuration and the degree, very difficult regarding audibility, sounds being loud enough. In general, consonants are the weakest of the sounds, yet they carry, and when we're looking at some of these consonant sounds, f, k, s, p, ch, sh, some of these combinations, these are softer sounds or weaker than some of these sounds, vowel sounds, e, u, I, b, g, d, m. So, okay, if we look at this audiogram, the right ears and the left ear are here, and normal hearing, meaning everything below that is audible. Yet, let's think about our hearing impaired patients who will have typically, with sensory neural hearing loss, better hearing in the low frequencies and then a sloping loss, making some of these consonant sounds, again, which are the weakest, yet they carry the most important information for the details of understanding conversational speech. Effects? Oh, okay. We need to talk about two different things. The effects of conductive hearing loss are going to be very different than the effect of cochlear or sensory neural hearing loss. We talked about the anatomy and physiology of the ear. So what do you know when there's a conductive loss? It's more of a mechanical loss. There could be a blockage in the ear canal due to cerumen or wax impaction. There could be a blockage in the middle ear like fluid, or the three middle ear bones or ossicles have hardened together, or from trauma, maybe they've broken together. They're not conducting the sound. Yet, once the sound coming in is turned up loud enough, it actually vibrates through the skull and eventually gets into the inner ear. So it vibrates hard enough that those waves, that fluid in the inner ear begins to move and then set the hair cells in motion. So, with a conductive loss, the effects are different than with a cochlear loss. With a conductive loss, we just need to turn up the sound. We just need to turn it up and it's clear. Versus with a conductive loss, because there's there's damage to the cochlea, the inner hair cell, turning up the sound isn't always the answer, because we've already talked about the concept quite a bit of a reduced dynamic range. We're going to talk about that again. With a sensory neural hearing loss, louder isn't always better, because there's going to be a narrowed range for the hearing impaired listener between their level of audibility, when it's just very barely audible, to their discomfort level is going to be a narrower range than their normal hearing peer. So we can make sound louder, but what happens in an ear with sensory neural hearing loss is they'll say, well, everything is louder, but it's not clear and it hurts. So The next line that says may not reach 100% is no matter how loud we turn the volume up on our audiometer to present words, the individual may never reach 100%. And with a retrocochlear loss beyond the cochlea, like a tumor with the auditory nerve, actually, when we turn the intensity up, so as we begin presenting the words louder and louder, their score actually gets worse. The next point are some very popular but generalizations dating way back to 1977. Persons with a flat hearing loss have better understanding. That's an interesting statement, and it's true in this sense. If we say we have a flat loss across the audiogram, we are basically thinking it's a little bit easier to amplify versus a sloping loss, where maybe you don't want to give them any boost in the low frequencies and emphasize the higher pitch sounds. So, a very broad generalization. Persons with flat loss will have better understanding. Persons with losses that slope in the high frequencies obviously will hear vowel sounds, which have more low frequency power, where their hearing would be more normal, than consonant sounds. Okay? Here's one that I don't think that's no longer true. Visual cues will remain important for persons with profound loss, even with amplification. True, but also visual cues are important for individuals with mild loss, moderately severe loss. Even you, the class, who I'm assuming for the most part have normal hearing, let's say you're in a crowded restaurant in a bar and it's difficult to hear, you're relying on visual cues to pick up the missing information that you're not getting auditorily. And we're going to talk about that with speech reading. Ranges for hearing loss. Okay, as I keep showing you different audiograms, I want to reiterate that there's no set standard in audiology of the range of normal, so it does vary per clinic. This is from a popular text describing the ranges of normal hearing to borderline, mild, moderate, severe, profound. I say my preferences, this is kind of the categories that I use, but they do vary and there's no set standard in audiology. One other thing that we need to talk about is, again, how we, again, I'm painting the portrait of our patient with sensorineural hearing loss and their needs, and why their needs often extend beyond amplification. So saying that testing, amplifying, even doing verification measures, even seeing them on an annual basis to see if their hearing's changed or if their programming needs to be changed isn't just enough. Oftentimes, because of the things that I'm going to talk about in this list, our patients are going to need more support than that. Alright, so the areas that we're going to talk about to paint that portrait of a patient with sensorineural hearing loss is going to be obviously a decrease in audibility. Actually, let me list them and then we'll talk about each category. A decrease in audibility, a decrease in dynamic range, which we've talked about, something that we haven't talked about, decrease in temporal and frequency resolution, and all of these deficits in combination or together. Although if you did take basic aud from me, we did talk about this, and actually some of these slides may even be familiar to you. The first one, obvious, a decrease in audibility. With sensorineural hearing loss, even a mild sensorineural hearing loss, we're going to have a decrease in audibility. Sounds are too soft. Softer phonemes may not be heard. Okay? People with mild to moderate hearing loss may not hear the softer phonemes, and remember, a phoneme is the smallest phonetic unit in a language that is capable of conveying a distinction in meaning, as in the M in mat versus the B in bat. Also, essential parts of the phonemes might not be heard. Sorry, I'm making sure I don't miss anything in my notes in case you're picking that up in the mic. And the third part regarding audibility is high frequent components of speech are weaker or softer than low frequency components. And we just looked at that when we looked at the audiogram with the so-called speech banana. And we also looked at typically with sensory neural hearing loss, typically but not always, we see a greater amount of hearing loss in the higher pitches or higher frequencies where more important components for speech or the distinction to bring the meaning of speech occur. Decrease in dynamic range. Okay, we've talked about this already in depth. The dynamic range again is going to be the difference in level between the threshold of audibility and the Alright, so we've talked at length about dynamic range. Is the difference in the difference between the threshold. So if we obtain the patient's threshold or their level of audibility, okay? So for example, if they raise their hand, we do the ascending descending method, and at 1,000 hertz, they raise their hand 2 out of the 3 times at 40 dB at 1,000 hertz. That's their threshold of audibility. Then we want to obtain, remember we talked about an uncomfortable listening level, how much louder we can turn it up before it becomes uncomfortable or painful to listen to. And it's opposite of what you think, because you would think, well, if a person can't hear, we could turn it up louder, 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 it's better. Yet this is the problem. There's a narrow dynamic range. The range is smaller of comfort. The range of comfort is smaller for an individual with sensory neural hearing loss versus normal hearing. And we have to compensate for this, or attempt to, with hearing aids, because we want to amplify weak sounds. We want average conversation also needs to be amplified, but we need to keep intense sounds or loud sounds still within that comfort range. And keeping those intense loud sounds in that comfort range that's accomplished by a feature of the hearing aids called compression. So when a loud sound comes in that would exceed the person's uncomfortable listening level, the hearing aid compresses that sound down to a level that it's comfortable. We need to make sure we set these levels, and this can be rather difficult. The next one is decrease in frequency resolution. When we have a decrease in frequency resolution, it's the diminished ability of a person to detect and analyze energy at one frequency in the presence of energy at another frequency, particularly if they're close. So, let me give you an example. If a background noise contains some energy at a nearby frequency, and the nearby frequency meaning the speech that the person's listening to, the conversation, the normal hearing person can do a pretty good job at separating these out and sending separate signals to the brain. One signal to each cochlea for the areas of stimulation. We can separate the speech we're listening to versus the noise. The brain can consider all the spectral information. The brain's putting together visual cues, thinking about the context from the information to separate the message. This is more difficult in a damaged cochlea, and this is the difficulty of separating noise out when the noise source is close to speech. For example, other people talking. Okay, so that's frequency resolution. Another issue that we have with sensory neural hearing loss is temporal resolution. This is a decrease in the ability to hear a signal that rapidly follows or is rapidly followed by a different signal. So for example, intense sounds can mask weaker sounds that immediately precede them or immediately follow. So if somebody's talking and there's a loud sound or a loud burst of sound, and then the person continues to talk, the normal hearing individual is able to pick that sound out right after the loud burst. But in a damaged cochlea, there's a decreased ability to follow that signal, okay, that rapidly follows or is rapidly followed by a loud sound. So this happens to a greater extent with people with sensory neural hearing loss, and that adversely affects speech intelligibility. And we know that many real-life background noises fluctuate, right? They're not necessarily steady-state sounds like the hum of your refrigerator or the hum of a fan or the hum of air conditioning. That sounds, background noise can fluctuate rapidly, and a normal hearing cochlea is able to extract the necessary information. This is harder to when we have a sensory neural hearing loss. There's another function in hearing aids that attempt to do this, that will compress the loud incoming sound and then try to open up again very quickly when speech occurs again. But again, these are difficult things to do, and even with the technology, and we can never replicate the normal hearing cochlea perfectly. And the other issue is all of these in combination, which we typically see with our patients. All these things together. Decrease in audibility with hearing loss is sounds aren't loud enough. Decrease in dynamic range. Soft sounds aren't audible, but loud sounds are painful. And a decrease in temporal and frequency resolution, whether loud sounds is before or after the speech, or the background noise is close to the speech. So that's temporal in time, or if their frequency characteristics are similar, and we typically see all these things in combination. So things that we have to do is set realistic expectations. Amplification may improve the ability to detect some sounds, but not all sounds, particularly if they have a severe to profound loss as we get towards 8,000 hertz or 6,000 hertz or 8,000 hertz. Impaired ears may not be able to adequately use the information and recognize and discriminate sounds. Hearing aids may limit some of the speech sound information due to the limitations of the hearing aids. We might not be able to boost sounds to make them audible when a threshold is at 90 dB. Hearing in noise remains a common complaint. So again, something we're always trying to struggle with. So hopefully the purpose of these slides was really to talk about the components of speech and what our goal is with amplification, but then also the realistic need of why our patients need more than here's the hearing aids. Hope that goes well for you. So hopefully this added another component, and then we're going to move on to psychological issues related to hearing loss. All right, thank you. And this is the wrap up. Again, if you have any questions or you're struggling with this material in any way, please feel free to email me and we can set up a time to either meet or chat. Thank you.